I was thinking that it might be a good idea if you and I formed an alliance.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Welcome to the greatest wrestling program in the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? Stop what you're doing and listen.
The Alliance Guys podcast with your hosts Kevin Frazier, DKM, and Jay Cal.
Well, guys, it is not Kevin Frazier, it is not DKM, but it is me, Jay Cal, and with me tonight is Vinny Berry. If you guys are unfamiliar with Vinny Berry, we're going to change that tonight because my guy here, Vinny, just came out with one of these great books here with a ton of legacy, a ton of history, a ton of tradition. And although it focuses on a lot of wrestling from the Gulf Coast, this is a very NWA influenced book. So, Vinny, talk to me, buddy. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. We've been looking forward to this conversation. You and I, we started talking about a week ago or so.
Right.
In fact, our mutual friend Rick Del Santo kind of pointed me in the right direction because I didn't know this book existed. And no disrespect intended, I didn't know you existed, but now I'm familiar with Wrestleville. I'm familiar with Vinny Berry. I'm familiar with Lance by Chance. In fact, I actually knew about this book without knowing it was you.
Okay.
And, just a real cool time, a lot of fun stuff here. Tell me about yourself. How did you get into this world that we call pro wrestling?
Well, I discovered wrestling when I was about 14 years old. I lived in right outside of Dallas, so I grew up on World Class Championship Wrestling.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with it, and I just followed it. And you know, over the years, it changed, as you know. I mean, it evolved and it became different things and whatever. But you know, I always liked wrestling. I liked the competition. And I've always liked writing as well. And when I moved to South Texas, I ended up writing for a lot of boxing and MMA websites. And when that ran its course, I wanted to keep on writing. And I just told my wife that I was going to just focus my attention on writing wrestling because it was just something I've always liked and I wanted to write. And so I had some wrestlers that were some contacts on Facebook, and I just started reaching out to them. And before you know it, I'm writing stories with them and putting them on a website, and you know, and then before you know it, I ran into Lance Von Erich and found him.
So when did Wrestleville come into existence, and what led up to that? Because as someone who's been running a wrestling themed website for a while now, I know that it's not always easy to create content. It's not always easy to get people who are interested in doing interviews. How did you get here? How did you start Wrestleville?
Okay. All right. So in April of, I guess it was spring of 2017, I started, you know, I reached out to a friend of mine who built the website. I was probably out maybe 6 months from writing the MMA. I was working for an MMA promotion. I was working with the PR department, and I was the matchmaker. That's a whole nother story in itself. But we're just glad nobody died. And, you know, I tell you, so I started that website with the Wrestleville.com. And I just started reaching out to wrestlers like Chaz Taylor, guys I had contact with, like Vordell. I had messaged him before, and all these guys were pretty receptive. Listen, I mean, you know as well as I do. I mean, you gotta knock on some doors, and sometimes no is you know, one step closer to a yes. And so
that's true.
You know, I've had some people who I really, really, really wanted to interview that said no, you know, but then I've had some that I couldn't believe said yes. And Harley Race was one of them. I couldn't believe he said yes. That was a good get, you know?
we definitely have to talk about Harley Race. It's funny you brought up Chaz Taylor. Now, do you still live in Texas? Do you still live in the Dallas Fort Worth area, or?
I don't live in Dallas. I live in South Texas. I live in the Rio Grande Valley.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. So
Now I do.
Now you do. So, and you've been there for a while in
about 10 years. Yeah.
So you were around for then a lot of Bruce Tharpe's NWA, the promotions that were out there, like
absolutely
Wrestling Revolution. I know that prior to Bruce Tharpe getting control of the NWA, he was running shows down there in the Rio Grande Valley. There was another promotion,
Brownsville.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. So you got to see, Scrap Iron Adam Pierce. You got to see Blue Demon Jr. You got to see Carlitos.
Barbie Hayden.
I could not come up with that name. That was hard for me. So you got to see a lot of those talents out there in Brownsville.
Right. Houston Carson, Chaz Taylor, Barbie Hayden came out there, Mike Dale.
What about Kevin Douglas?
Kevin Douglas, yep.
Mm-hmm. Kevin does the podcast with us. The podcast. So one of my dear friends. In fact, we met while he was junior heavyweight champion because he would not only wrestle in Texas, Brownsville, Fort Worth, all those spots, San Antonio, Austin. But then he was, while junior heavyweight champion, he was traveling to the Northeast. He was traveling out here to California, and we built some rapport over the internet. And I had an opportunity to interview him not only on over the phone, but also in person at the Championship Wrestling from Hollywood tapings when they were still part of the NWA. So, sorry, Kevin's my guy. So whenever I could talk about him, I like to talk him up. But
yeah.
So did you have any connections to the actual wrestling that was going on in Brownsville, or were these just events that you were attending as a fan?
Yeah, just attending as a fan. Actually, I went to one of them down there, and I would always get a front row seat, but I'd always bring a camera, like a little point and shoot. And there for a couple matches, they just assumed that I was part of the photography crew, and then one of the girls who was wrestling called me out and said I was a mark and told me to sit down. And before you know it, the ring crew came and said, either sit down or leave. And so that was that. I just put the camera away. And but yeah, I got some great shots.
Sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, and especially at wrestling events. I was just at an event this last weekend where no one knew who I was. It was very incognito, and it was a local indie show out here in Southern California. And I just started taking pictures ringside. No one said anything. No one, batted an eye. You can get away with what you can get away with,
Right.
And I think the important thing about that is when you're out there taking those photos, it's not because you're trying to be part of the show, but you're actually trying to document the history of that show. And I think that's really reputable, because a lot of you're not getting paid to do that. You're not, no one's giving you money to do that. You're doing that because you're a fan and you want to celebrate the sport itself. So then I guess that brings us back to Wrestleville. So what inspired you to really get that going? What was the driving force behind it?
Well, again, I love wrestling and I love writing, and I wanted to, I just kind of wanted something to do. I wanted, a creative, positive, I guess, hobby or pastime, and but it really took on a life of its own, and now I look back, 4 years into it. I've got 2 books to my credit. I've had probably over 100 interviews, and I've got some pretty good contacts. I can't believe, some of the people who I talk to, is like, Damian Wayne is a really good guy to me. Sean Hernandez is a wonderful person. And, James Beard and Greg Anthony, all those guys have helped me so much. just with helping me with information or, whatever it may be, their time, that's probably the most important,
100%. I mean, and again, what you're doing is so tireless and thankless sometimes. And what you're really trying to do is you're cementing the legacy of those men and women you've spoken to. When you document their journey, you're really like documenting the history of professional wrestling. And even though it, like, for you and I'm going to say for me too, it's a smaller scale, but if you weren't talking about Damian Wayne and I wasn't talking about Damian Wayne, would his legacy still be there? And that's not an insult to Damian Wayne at all, but he doesn't wrestle in the WWE. He doesn't wrestle in AEW. And, a lot of times that spotlight doesn't get shined on these superstars. And Damian Wayne's a hell of a talent. And as far as
absolutely,
as far as I'm concerned, he should have been world's heavyweight champion for the National Wrestling Alliance. But
yeah.
So you made these contacts through basically the Gulf Coast region of the NWA. We were talking a little bit offline about this book. Guys, this is the book Wrestleville. And I think this is, for any NWA fan, this is a must-have. You can get the book at, I have the address right here, lancebychance.com, which is the title of his first book. But you could also get this book too, which is this profiles Lance Von Erich, one of the Von Erich brothers.
Right.
And
cousin. He was a Von Erich cousin.
Yeah. Oh, cousin. Excuse me. And I really feel like, again, both of these books, I think if you're a purist of pro wrestling, if you're passionate about the NWA, these are must-haves for you because, I mean, there's so much content here. And like, I just randomly opened up the book to Mike Rapata. And, a lot of wrestling fans won't know who Mike Rapata is, but I mean, he's a former 2-time world's heavyweight champion. And there's something to be said about Mike Rapata. And again, you've cemented his legacy. You've helped document that. So no matter what happens in the next 20 years, this book right here documents that rich history of the NWA. So I think that's pretty cool.
Right.
Let's talk about the book because
sure.
So Wrestleville was a website that you started, and you just kind of you were putting stories up there, correct?
Yes, I was putting stories up there, and I was looking for my next project to do, and I had an idea which fell through, and what I was gonna do, I was reaching out to promotions across the country. I wanted to kind of like maybe do 5 or 6 and just see how the pandemic affected them, but I just kept on hitting wall after wall. Like, I get an interview but no pictures, or I get pictures and no interview, or people were really trying to figure out, I guess, what they were going to do with their companies or their livelihood at the time,
Right.
And so I just was talking to John Paul one day, and he just said, hey, if you ever want to do that, we got the pictures, we could do it down here in the Gulf Coast. But I didn't want to really pigeonhole the book, because the book has a lot of pictures from the Gulf Coast because that's where John Paul lives. But this book contains 35 short stories. There's 3 NWA World Heavyweight Champions in here. There's 5 NWA Junior Heavyweight Champion stories in here. And the stories, from the 2017 to about 2018, there's a interview just a couple of weeks before Tim Storm loses the NWA title to Nick Aldis, and then there's an interview with Bruce Tharpe, probably I think about 5 or 6 months after he sold, but it was a few months after he sold to Billy Corgan, and it was pretty interesting. So this really documents that time. There's pictures in there from 2011 and up, so about 10 years of pictures from different events around the Gulf Coast. But this is volume 1. We call it the Pro Wrestling Vault because, there's, like I said before the interview, you don't really know what's in it until you open it up. But I wanted to share something with you, and this is one of the things I like about the book is that it honors NWA champions throughout. I have Adam Pearce, I have Cody Rhodes, and on the next page we have Jazz. And then just to read off the some of the names in the table of contents, we've got Tim Storm, Greg Anthony, Barrett Brown, Bobby Fulton, James Beard, Tracy Smothers. There's an interview in here with Bill Dundee, which I think is probably one of the best interviews I've done in my 20 years of interviewing people, because he was just so candid and honest, and just it was just, I couldn't believe he was telling me some of the things he was telling me. And then Chase Owens, and I don't know if you know who Big Ramp is, but he's a manager, and he is just hilarious. He's kind of got he just takes a little bit from every wrestling manager there is, and he's probably featured in this book. He's got a story in this book, but he's probably in this book 30, 40, 50 times. I mean, he's all over the place.
Yeah. It's funny you brought up Bill Dundee, and I never got to interview Bill Dundee, but one of my favorite interviews I ever did was with Matt Bourne, Doink the Clown. And the reason why I enjoyed it so much is because, and it's something you touched on earlier, that he was so giving of his time. I'm not Pro Wrestling Illustrated, nor are you. We're not like the top of the mountain. We're guys who are passionate about the business, and we're passionate about the NWA, and we're passionate about these territories. And he was so available and so open with his time. And it was just such a refreshing look at it. This is a guy who's been to the mountaintop. He wrestled for WCW, wrestled for ECW, wrestled for the WWE. He's a guy that made his name in the high times of pro wrestling, the UWF Mid-South. And so for him to take that time to talk to me, little old me, was awesome. But like the stories he told, and his willingness to just be so candid and transparent, was such just an awesome time to speak to him. So I imagine that your stories with Bill Dundee are probably very similar in that he just gave so much of himself to you.
Oh yeah, and he says in the interview, that the word wrestling is on the marquee. It's not acrobatics and flips. It's
right. No, I mean, when I talked to Matt Bourne, that was back when Adam Pearce was still world's heavyweight champion. In fact, there was a big event for NWA Southwest at the time. That was Ken Taylor's wrestling promotion, and they were doing this really big show. And Matt Bourne was back wrestling as Doink the Clown, and he was literally putting his gimmick on the line. Like if he lost, he would take off the face paint, he'd take off the wig, and he would just go back to being Matt Bourne. And one of the coolest things about it was he was so positive about the NWA, put over Adam Pearce as world's heavyweight champion. And I thought, wow, like again, this guy is, Adam Pearce could be anybody in the world to this guy, because he's been to that mountaintop. But for him to put over the importance of the 10 pounds of gold, to put over the world's heavyweight champion, I thought was really, really cool. And I'm wondering, do you have any stories like that? I mean, you talked to Harley Race, for crying out loud, the world's greatest wrestler on God's green earth. I'm sure he had a lot of wonderful things to say about the National Wrestling Alliance.
Yeah, well, how that all came about. Yeah, Harley was just a wonderful guy to talk to. In 2017, him and Larry Henning were inducted into the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Wichita Falls. And I just thought I was just going to reach out to, I thought, you know what, I'll just Google Larry Henning. And I found Larry Henning. He was selling real estate at the time, and I went ahead and called the number to the real estate company and talked to his wife, and she said, call this number this evening. So I called the number this evening, and I can't remember if I got him or his wife, but anyway, they told me to call this evening. I called that evening and I talked to him, and then right before I got off the phone with him, he goes, "So what did Harley have to say?" And I said, "Well, I didn't talk to Harley." He goes, "You want to talk to Harley?" And I said, "Yeah, but I don't have his number." He goes, "Give me 1 minute." Gave me his number. I cold called him, and he answered, and I told him who I was, and he goes, "Okay, sure." And he talked to me for, I don't know. I didn't take up too much of his time, about 30, 40 minutes maybe. And I think I had one or two stories on my website at the time. And I remember when I got off the phone with Harley Race, I told my wife, I said, "Well, we can close the website now. I just caught the biggest fish in the ocean, you know?"
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to top Harley. Maybe Ric Flair, but that's about it, you know?
Well, check this out. So that night, he told me to call his school the next day.
Yeah.
So to get a picture from one of the guys he gave me the name of. Well, I called the school, and Harley answered. He talked to me for another hour and a half.
Wow.
Then I did a story, the night before I got the story for the inductee story, and then I did a story on Harley Race by himself, and I was going to post it, but then Harley fell off that ladder. I don't know if you remember. He fell off a ladder that summer, and so I held on to that story until he got out of the woods a little bit, and then I posted it in December. So I was sitting on that story for about, I don't know, 5 or 6 months or 4 or 5 months,
Yeah. And Harley Race, I mean, the guy's a legend. I mean, that's not hyperbole either. That dude is just literally one of the greatest wrestlers to ever live. I never was fortunate enough to meet him, but one of my good friends, David Marquez from the United Wrestling Network, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, he actually was under the tutelage of Harley Race when he first got into World Legion Wrestling. That initially started off as Dave Marquez and Harley Race and Gordon Soley before it became just Harley Race's promotion. And when Dave saw him, Dave went to that the show where Leland was challenging Nick Aldis for the 10 pounds of gold, and Dave was so kind to take my replica championship belt, which I have countless NWA world champions who have signed it, and he got Harley Race to sign it, and shortly after that we lost Harley. So I felt very, very fortunate to David and for Harley for taking the time to sign my belt because he's such a legend. And like I said, I really regret not having an opportunity to speak with him, but that's great that you got that story. And again, that's in the book for Wrestleville. And you guys definitely want to check this thing out because, like I said, it's a must-have for any fan of the NWA. I mean, you sit here, you pull through the pages. You got Mr. USA with the World Junior Heavyweight title. You've got Chase Owens. You've got Ricky Morton. Spinning through more of these pages. You've got pictures from the Wildcat, who was associated with the NWA at the time. You've got Rob Conway, another world's heavyweight champion in here. Just so much, again, for any NWA fan, I really think it's a must-have.
And what I like about this book so much, Jay, is like you don't have to commit yourself to the whole thing. It's 35 short stories, and then if you get tired of reading, then you can look at the pictures. I have a buddy of mine the other night was telling me that he was going through these events. Like he'd pick like one from this event on June 10th, 2016, Callaway, Florida. So he's looking up these events online and seeing who else was on that card, And then another buddy of mine was going through these stories, and the people that he didn't know, he was looking them up on YouTube and watching some of their matches. And so that's the whole idea of this book. This book is to to give people exposure. For one, let's preserve the history here and let's share some stories. But also, too, yeah, we know Whacker Luke and Bobby Fulton and Harley Race and Tracy Smothers and the Rock and Roll Express. But what about Van Horn? What about Big Ramp over here? What about Mr. USA? We have Chaz Taylor, Vordell Walker, Barrett Brown, James Beard, Shay Summers. Shay, I reached out to her. She's not wrestling right now, but me and my friends, there's a few pictures in here of her, and there's a story in here of her. We loved her spirit. If you see the look on her face and the pictures that she's in, she's the real deal.
Right.
She's the real deal. She's young, but for whatever reason, she's not wrestling right now. But you know what? She's documented, man.
Yeah.
And and this is the thing. There's a lot of people we watch. I watch a little bit of the big shows from here and there. I love independent wrestling. I just there's nothing else like it in the world, right? You get the best seat in the house. Even if you're in the back row, you've got one of the best seats in the house. And you get to see these people tell these stories. And some of them are amazing. Some of them are young. Some of them have been doing it for a while. But you know what? It's the real. It's the. I don't know what It's the. I don't know. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but it's like the soul of wrestling, man.
Can I make a guess? The authenticity of pro wrestling, because. What we see in the WWE, I mean, I'm not going to say that that's not wrestling, because it 100% is. What you see in AEW, that is also wrestling, but wrestling is so has such a wide range of what it is, what it can be, what some of us think it should be, but what other people think it should be. And there's so many different flavors. I've always said that pro wrestling is like Baskin Robbins 31 flavors. There's more than 31, but you could literally, any type of entertainment that you like, you can find a wrestling that corresponds to it. If you want over-the-top soap opera dramatic wrestling, hey, just turn on USA on Monday nights. You've got Raw, and it'll give you those kind of stories. You want the more athletic style version of pro wrestling, you could get New Japan World and watch strong style pro wrestling, and it's there for you. You like the hardcore matches, you like the death matches, that's out there. Do you want comedy wrestling? It's there. If you want Southern wrestling, it's all available to us, and some of it's even free. You just go on YouTube and literally type in a wrestling promotion's name or a wrestler that you like, and you could probably find matches of theirs at your fingertips. And I think that's so amazing. And we have such an upper hand on some of the people who watched wrestling 30 or 40 years ago that only, whatever was in their territory, that's all they got. But when you get to independent wrestling, again, it's very similar, that you're on the pulse of what pro wrestling is, because it's the authentic. That's as real as it gets. These guys, some of them, they have real life jobs. They have a real life after wrestling. They don't go on the road 360 days a year. They, this is their wrestling. They do it every other weekend and put on their effort. And I think it's, again, really, really awesome that gets documented. And I think it's very cool that you produced this book. So
I photographed a match a couple years ago down here in South Texas. Two guys, they were probably 40 years old, and they were a little smaller than me, probably 160, 170 maybe. And they were opening match. I don't think I'll ever forget that match, man. It was amazing. And I mean, they set the tone for the night. And you know what? There was a reason why those two guys were in the first match. They knew what they were doing. And you know what? Here's the thing. We turn on the TV, we turn on WWE and AEW and NWA, and we see these guys. They a lot of these guys came from the independent scene too. You know, a lot of them are pictured in here. You know, we got a picture of AJ Styles, Keith Lee back 5-6 years ago, you know.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to say was that, you know, these people, you know, in the independent scene, they need exposure too. And John is really passionate. John Paul is really passionate about wrestling like I am. He does the pictures, I do the stories, but you know what? He really believes that people are going to be discovered from a piece of material like this. That people are going to be, you know, he's hoping that people will get booked. We've put some of his promo shots back here. How do we get it up there?
There you go.
But these guys are from, you know, they wrestle in the Gulf Coast in the Alabama area. And you just go through here and you look at some of these people, you know, there's Jay Davis. You know, I got a story of him on my website. And we've got Big Ramp over here. And there's I want to show you a real quick picture of a guy that I just love to death. Mac Daddy Duds, right there. He's got a money bow on. He's full of jewelry. He's like a trailer park, I don't know, high roller, whatever you want to call him. But you know what? He is a lot of fun, and that's what it is. Wrestling's a lot of fun, man. You know,
I'm thumbing through the book as you're talking, and you know, you come across Caleb with a K. Right. There.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's pretty cool. Again, you know, some of these guys between when you put this book into play and now have already kind of made that next level. And
you know what? I saw him on MLW.
Yeah. I remember he was part of an NWA group that was based out of North Carolina that was called NWA New Beginnings. And when that promotion started, there was so much hype behind it. And he was one of the reasons why, because a young dude who was very athletic, very great in the ring. And I think he even took part in the World Junior Heavyweight tournament that they had later, a few years after that. But one of the viewers in the chat said, Vordell Walker, I miss him in the NWA. I know that he's in the book. Can you tell us a little bit about Vordell Walker in your time when you spoke with him?
Yeah, he's oh, I was afraid of that. Sorry about that. Hey, I like Vordell. Vordell, you know, he in the story he talks about how he believed in traveling, and he thinks that that's really how he honed his craft, you know, about traveling around and wrestling in different promotions. He didn't believe in staying in one place, you know, and a lot of guys, you know, from the old day, you know, when you go in the territories, that's how they did it, was they traveled around and went to different places, worked with different people, and, you know, then they worked their way up to their skill level. And, you know, he talked a lot about that. And I thought that was really neat. And he's still wrestling in Louisiana in the Gulf Coast. My friend John Paul runs into him periodically, and he's still going strong. Absolutely.
He was in various NWA promotions really throughout not just the Bruce Tharpe era, but before him, the Bob Trovich era, where he was competing for NWA Wildcat. He was competing for NWA Main Event and NWA Ring Warriors. And I mean, I was lucky enough to see Vordell out here when they did a big tournament for it was a wrestling promotion that was driven by doing charity work. And it was called Wrestling Cares. They did this big tournament, and he was in there. There was some guys from all across the states. You know, we had guys from Atlanta, from Georgia. We had guys from the Midwest. We had guys from the East Coast. The finals ended up being Johnny Gargano and Adam Cole. Oh, wow. Baby. And it was just like, wow, that tournament was so ahead of its time. But again, featured guys who in this book, because of that they were important to the to that time. And I think that's really cool that this book is features so much. And I mean, like, I'm looking at the cover here and I'm like, wow, that's the Rock and Roll Express looking at me. How did you get with Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson? How did that happen?
Well, actually, Robert Gibson's really only mentioned in the story. I didn't interview him, but I did interview Ricky Morton. I reached out to his school in Chuckey, Tennessee, and I talked to his partner, and I told his partner what I wanted to do. I told him I wanted to write a story for my website, and I wanted to focus on his school, and he talked to me a lot about his philosophy of wrestling. He's an old school guy, and he believes in, doing it a certain way and preserving wrestling. There's some things you just don't do, and if you talk to these veterans or these old time wrestlers, these guys that were in it 30 years 40 years ago, guys like Bill Dundee or Ricky Morton, they have specific ways of doing things and why you do it and why you don't do it, right? So he talked a little bit about that. And funny thing about that story was he only talked to me for about not even 20 minutes. It was about between maybe 18 minutes. And I thought to myself, I said, man, I'm never going to get anything out of this, because he had someone knocking on his door. He had like a repairman coming. He was packing for a trip. You could hear all this commotion going on, and he's answering my questions. But he was like, hey, yeah, I'm really going to have to go, man. I got to go. And I said, yeah, okay, but one more thing. What about this and what about that? And he'd tell me. And then all of a sudden he just ended the conversation. And, I was thinking I'm never going to get anything out of this. And then I went back and I listened to the recording, and I thought, man, this guy gave me nothing but gold. I mean, everything he said was legit. It was something that I could work with, and, I just really enjoyed that conversation. And I really thought to myself, I thought, here I thought that it was going to be something that I couldn't use, but then here we got this nice story, and he talks about training, I mean, when someone is believes in wrestling, doing things a certain way. In the story, he talks about, hey, wrestling is entertainment, and he's gotten a lot of grief for having kids, like young people on his shows, wrestling young people, of course. But you know what? He believes that wrestling is a discipline, and that it keeps people from, doing negative things. And, he just thinks that, some people are criticizing something that they don't need to,
Yeah. Well, and
he's doing a good thing.
That's a byproduct of society today. Everyone's got an opinion, and everyone needs to hear it. And sometimes we should just zip it and appreciate what we have in front of us.
Sure.
Let's talk about how you got from website to book, because honestly, like I said, I'm proud of you, Vinny.
Thank you.
I don't know you that well. We just started talking a couple weeks ago, but to be able to transition some stories you wrote on the internet into a full-fledged book, and it's not even your first book, because again, Lance by Chance is the autobiography. Let me try that again. The autobiography of Lance Von Erich. I mean, you took something that's a passion, wrestling. You wrote about it. You took photographs of it. You met people. You made connections. But then to take all of that and turn it into a book, I mean, that's you did what I've wanted to do for like the last 12 years. So tell me about that process, because I'm sure that's not an easy one, because if anyone could do it, we'd all be doing it. But how was that process? How did you get into the world of authoring books?
Okay, so, well, I met Lance Von Erich, and I met Lance by
by chance.
I met him by chance, literally. And when I got in touch with him, I just wanted to write a story on my website about him. But the more I started talking to this guy, I thought, this is the most incredible story that I ever heard, because a lot of people thought that he only wrestled for about a year and a half. He was in and he was out, right? Because that's what we thought. Well, he had a 10-year career, and he talks about it in the book. He wrestled probably about 8 of those years overseas, and he was a big international star. A lot of people don't know that. Another thing people don't understand is, they all criticize him for not being a very good wrestler. Guy wasn't a wrestler. Guy never wrestled a day before in his life until David Manning met him on a golf course, and they sent him up to Portland to get training, and then they brought him down here prematurely to Texas.
Wow.
He never wrestled before. And so, you got to remember, he's wrestling next to Kevin and Kerry, who've been wrestling their dad in the living room for 20 years already. So, the thing is that it was such an amazing catch. And I always wanted to write a book, but I didn't know how to write a book. And I told, after Lance was blown away by the article I put on the website. He just thought, wow, he was making me sound like I was, Ernest Hemingway or something. I was like, dude, I ain't that good, but he was just blown away. And so I said to him, you know what? If you ever consider writing a book, please consider me. Just please let me work with you. And I think I only had to say that to him once or twice. And one night I said it, and he said, write the book. So that's how I wrote the book. Well, I had met Kenny Casanova. Well, I didn't meet him. I've never met him in person, but we've talked online like this, and we've talked on the phone quite often. And Kenny Casanova, I read one of his books. I read the Kamala book, and I enjoyed it so much that I wrote like a review, or I sent him an email or something, like a review on his website or something about the book. And, he discovered it like months later, and, he just thanked me for it. And I had sent him some stories to look at it. And then one day he messaged me out of the blue. He goes, enough with writing all these articles. And I was like, okay, it was kind of like random, right? And he goes, are you ready to write a book? And then I said, well, I said, I'd love to, but I've got a couple, I got my plate's full. And he goes, you're writing a book, aren't you? And I said, yeah, I am. He goes, who are you writing about? And I told him, and he was like, whoa. So that was how I was introduced to Kenny. And Kenny, from that day on, has always just been a cheerleader and a mentor and a good friend to me, and helping me. And, he kind of helped me with, when I was telling him the story that I wanted to do something about, I didn't really know what the story was, but I knew there was a story there about COVID and wrestling, right? But I just didn't know what it was. And he says, look, man, you've already have all this material. You wrote all these stories. You said, clean them up, package them nice, put them in, you'll reach a whole new audience. And that's what I'm doing. And then with John Paul was like, look, I have over 10,000 pictures, and I'm not going to make a coffee book or a coffee table book out of them.
Right.
Yeah. So he was like, take the pictures. And so, so we just stuck them in there, and it's kind of potlucky, it's kind of like going to a buffet table, but that's why we called it the Pro Wrestling Vault, because you don't know what's in it before you open it. It is a volume 1. I've got volume 2 in the works. And also, too, what's special about this book is that every book comes, as a bonus, will come with a surprise signed signature. That one has Tim Storm in it. We have Tim Storm, Chaz Taylor, Damian Wayne, Sean Hernandez, Josh Lewis, Greg Anthony, Bobby Fulton, C.W. Anderson. So we've got about 13 names, and I think it's a nice touch, that every book comes with it's signed, and it's not extra, it's within the price of the book.
I think that's such a cool thing, and having met Tim Storm, and I have his signature on a belt, I have his signature on a photo somewhere, but having that signature again and just seeing it in the book, not that it needed to be any more legitimate than it already was, but it just feels like even more legitimate with that signature in there. I think that was a great marketing strategy. I know that's not, I don't think most people are going to buy the book just for the signature, but that, like you said, that sure is a great bonus for the vaults. And, and I got the book yesterday. It arrived in the post office yesterday. I told you this offline. I didn't have a chance to check it out, but I started reading it today, and I got all the way to Damian Wayne, which is about 20 pages of the book, and it's an easy read. Like
right.
You need to put it down to go do something else, you can, and you can come right back to it, and it just picks up right where it lets off. But I will tell you guys this: it gets very hard to let that book go because you start hearing about some of these stories. And I listened to you on a different podcast where the host of the show was mentioning Chaz Taylor and how he was talking about Owen Hart. And
right.
I've spoken to Chaz Taylor, and I had never heard that story about him working with Owen Hart back in those days when the WWF, then now WWE, would come to the South, and Chaz would get to wrestle those matches. And I thought, wow, what a great story. Like I had no idea. And it hooks you as soon as you start reading some of these stories and you hear some of these anecdotes. And again, the fact of the matter is that this book really, like you said, this started off as a way to kind of show what was happening during COVID for wrestling promotions, and then kind of metamorphosis.
Yeah, in a totally different direction. And you know what? I'm really glad that it kind of worked out this way, because I sit back and I can't tell you how proud I am of this piece of work. It's, to me, it's very gratifying and satisfying just to look at this and think, wow, there's a lot of hard work, there's a lot of time. You were asking me earlier, what's it take? Boy, I tell you, if you want to do something like this, you need to slow your roll. It's one of those things that you really got to take your time with, because it's quite the process, and formatting is challenging, and I can do so much, and then I have to send it off to somebody, let him do a couple steps, and then I bring it back, and then I can do some more stuff, but it's challenging. But I tell you, it is very rewarding when I sit back and I look at this, and I keep a book by my nightstand, and I've only had the book for about a week or two, and so I pick it up almost every night before I go to bed, and I look at it, and I read a story, and it's almost like, I know what the story says. I wrote it, I've probably read it 20 times, but just to read the story again, it's just like, wow, man, it's if you love wrestling, it's really hard not to like this book.
A lot of times I get labeled as an expert of the Wilderness era, and that Wilderness era name changes from time to time. I use it to define the time between WCW and TNA, but a lot of people even call the last decade part of the Wilderness years. In fact, basically up until when Billy Corgan purchased the NWA, that a lot of people still consider that the Wilderness era of the NWA. And although I don't think this is the Wilderness era, I identify this as the Bruce Tharpe era, but it is literally like a who's who of that timetable, that time frame, because like you said, there's articles in here about, of course, Bruce Tharpe, but then like again, there's Mike, there is Tim Storm, Chase Owens, Eric Andrews, Mr. USA, Van Horn, Barrett Brown, Greg Anthony. I mean, so much of that time, it's almost like a flashback to me. And I think, again, anybody who's new to the NWA, who has not, just knows the NWA from the William Patrick Corgan era, the Lightning One era, really would be doing themselves a service by picking up this book and getting into it, because, again, it's giving you context. The NWA didn't just start when Billy Corgan purchased it, and it never really stopped. So like there wasn't a break ever in that era from when the WCW and the NWA split ways. There was still an NWA that continued to roll through, and I think you did a great job in capturing an era in this book, and I think that's really, really cool. So I really do want anyone who is watching this to keep that in mind. And again, the book itself, I mean, I think I personally, I had no problem, putting down $20 plus the tax or whatever it was to get this book, because I think again, there's so much great stuff in here, and I can't stress it enough that if you are a true NWA fan, this is a must-have. And I mean, that's the highest praise I can give it, because as someone
That's pretty good.
As someone who's been documenting this journey from the NWA for the last 12 years, I don't think I've seen anything more succinct, that was more credible, that had the right people that this book has. And I think that's really, really awesome. And like I said, I take it for what it's worth, but I'm proud of the work that you've done here, and I'm very happy to get into this even more. And like I said, anybody who's watching this right now, obviously you're a fan of the NWA, learn about the history, learn about the tradition, learn about the legacy, and pick yourself up this book from Wrestleville. That's my big plug there, Vinny, because like I said, I'm blown away by this, and I can't wait to dive even deeper into it.
Thank you so much.
So now folks can follow you on socials. We discovered that you're on Facebook, facebook.com Wrestleville, and that's WRESTLEVILLE. You're also on Twitter at Wrestle_VILLE. And if folks want to get in contact with you personally, how can they do that?
They can call me, or they can call me. You can you can go to my website. There's it's Vinny@Wrestleville.com. That's the best way, Vinny@Wrestleville.com. And you can email me there, and I'll get your emails. And yeah, if you have any questions, you want to pay by PayPal or Cash App, just email me. You can go to the website, www.lancebychance.com, and the store is there. You can buy any one of the 3 books selected. We've got this one here, of course, and then we have Lance by Chance, and then Lance signed some books as well, so you can get that. And when this book came out, I went ahead and I discounted the price on the Lance book, so you'll save a few dollars there on that. And it's definitely another book that I'm very proud of. And I'll tell you this, I've said this before, of all the wrestlers that I could have interviewed, I got to be the luckiest guy in the world to be able to interview Lance Von Erich, because what a story and what a find. And it is just one of those stories that a lot of people thought they knew, and they had no clue.
My co-host DKM, he actually has that book, and he's had it for a while. And when I told him that I was interviewing you, he's like, "Oh, Lance by Chance." I said, "You read the book?" He's like, "Yeah, I bought it a year ago." So you're well represented here on the Alliance Guys podcast. And you guys also don't be afraid to check out Wrestleville.com, because although these are from the vault, Vinny's still collecting stories right now. I mean, Jeremiah Plunkett, Kerry Morton, Thunder Rosa, Andrew Anderson, just incredible. I mean, there's still content, and you don't want to miss out on this stuff, because this is again documenting the history of pro wrestling as it's happening. I think it's really, really cool. So again, I thank you for your time, Vinny, this evening.
Yeah. And also, too, just real quick, I'd like to mention that, this past year I started a podcast as well. And
Okay.
I've got some interviews on there with Tokyo Monster Cahagas.
Friend of the show.
I've interviewed Thunder Rosa.
Friend of the show.
And I've interviewed, yeah. What's
Oh,
that?
I'm just saying these are people. We have this same circle.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny we haven't met before because the people that
Right.
you've interviewed, I'm like, hey, I talked to those guys. I talked to her. I talked to him.
Right. And this is my wheelhouse. This is the stuff that I love. I mean, me and you this will probably not be our last conversation. I could
No,
probably.
I was gonna put a save the date for next year when the next release comes out because I'll be sure to have you on then. But maybe even before then, we could talk some more wrestling. Real quick, I know we're running out of time, but I just had to ask you because you are obviously a fan of the NWA. You're a fan of that 10 pounds of gold. You're a fan of the legacy of the National Wrestling Alliance. Do you follow the NWA currently? Are you watching Power or the pay-per-views, or have you still yet to discover Billy Corgan?
Yeah. No. I watch. I have the I guess the subscription for the NWA.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've caught a couple of the pay-per-views. Not recent though, and
Sure.
Man, I tell you, when you're working on a project like this, you don't get to see much.
Right.
It's but I still need my wrestling fix, and so I'll go in there. I got that when the network changed hands,
Yeah.
and I didn't keep it when it went to Peacock because I couldn't even figure out how to renew their subscription. So
Right.
I went ahead and I got the NWA, and I turned that on, watched a couple matches, and then I go back to my writing, and then I need a wrestling fix, and then I might turn on AEW, or I watched a couple matches about a week ago, and but yeah, I'm not opposed to the current product at all, but I can't. Like if I watch a pay-per-view, here's why I like the network so much, because I didn't have to commit myself to a whole program, to a whole 3 hours. I could go on there, and if I wanted to binge watch Tommy Rich, I could do that. If I wanted to binge watch Ivan Koloff, I could do that, and I'd get in the mood that all I wanted to do was watch King Kong Bundy all day, and I would do that.
5 count. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and just a heads up in case you didn't know, and we'll wrap this up, but the NWA is returning to YouTube on a more regular basis starting January 8th. Okay. The NWA will have their new show, NWA USA. So I know that you're busy writing, but another outlet for you, if you will, for some more modern day grappling. But Vinny, I do appreciate your time.
Yes.
I wish you all the best and much success. And I can't push this book enough because, again, I think you did a wonderful job here. Like I said, I've just started diving into it. I can't wait to get to the rest of it. And much success, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. Again, you can find us on the socials at the Alliance Blog. You can find us YouTube or Spotify, Apple, all those good places at the Alliance Blog. Until next time, we'll see you guys at the matches. Y'all have a good night. Thanks again for tuning in to the Alliance Blog Podcast, a presentation of alliance-wrestling.com. We genuinely appreciate your support. Would you consider subscribing so you won't miss any future episodes? We'd also like to remind you that we do a live stream every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific on YouTube at the Alliance Blog. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, TikTok, and Twitch at the Alliance Blog. Remember, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is essentially your own. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.